you going to lead off? Are you going to ask the questions? How do you want to do this?
You want to tennis match it back and forth?
Sure.
So we're talking about our recent trip from Oregon to California?
Yes.
Is that what we're doing?
Yes. And all the things that has brought into our awareness, and how we have been playing together with it. Like if we look at things from the aspect of play, because that's a big thing for you and I, right? Mm-hmm. Is playing instead of doing or working. And maybe it's semantics, but it is a different kind of energy, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that, well, first, for me, play and working, let's just start there. Working for my past life has been with effort and drudgery and resistance and have tos and shoulds. So that's what working used to feel like for me. Now I'm learning working can be similar to play. When you're doing the things you love to do, it doesn't feel like effort. We're working right now, right? But this doesn't feel like effort or drudgery or any of those things. So I think one, having to redefine and look at how have I spent my entire life working, right? Versus doing the things you love to do and then allowing things to come from that. That's number one.
Yeah.
And second, I want to know for you is, at least for me, and maybe it's like this for everybody, but the intention we went into and then what we got out are vastly different than what, like we thought we were like going to go down the 101 and we were going to like have all the fun, which we did have all the fun, right? But like all of the awareness, and maybe that's what happens. I think sometimes that's what happens after the fact. I think sometimes as you get, depending on what it is, right, you get more practiced at ahead of time, right? Stopping something before it even happens, a behavior or something like that. So do you want to talk about, I don't know, what your intention was in the beginning and then what you have come to all of the awarenesses after the fact?
Sure. So I want to back up even farther. Like, let's take it super big picture first and focus on the fact that one of the things that you and I have been playing with, both with ourselves as individuals, with each other, within the Who University group, and also knowing that our intention is to eventually, like, to be bringing this to the world simultaneously, is how we grow and evolve, how all of our experiences in life, all the things that we say that we want are for a feeling. And so really big picture, knowing that you and I have been shifting this goal mindset of, I want to make X amount of dollars, or I want to have a boat, or I want to have, I want to live a certain place, have certain things. Like, we have changed that to being, what is our intention, our overall intention, and how do we want to feel? So our overall intention, or my overall intention, has been to grow and evolve and be fluid in that, to have ease and flow with that growth instead of it always feeling like such a painful, difficult experience. And the feelings that I'm wanting to cultivate are feelings of ease, flow, unconditional love, joy, connection, unity. All of those feelings are like sort of setting the stage for the overall environment that turns out is my life and
As your
what I'm,
baseline, as your new baseline now, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when, um, for me, relationships and connection are my gold. In the past, they've been all the lead, like all the crap that's happened, all the stories that I have about um, my lovability, my value, all of those things have been where I've given a focus to my past experiences as like not good, bad, difficult, challenging, I'm not enough or I'm too much, etc. And when we were talking about um, like we're always talking about our relationships and how they're so valuable to us and in our experiences, right? You had mentioned wanting to do a road trip when you were preparing to move to Maui. So why don't you share about kind of your journey and what you were thinking?
So funny because when you were like, well, when your bestie says you want to like have a road trip, don't you offer that to her? And I was like, I would never take a road trip. Like, road is not my ideal form of transportation. Air is, right? So I was thinking, okay, I've got to get from point A to point B. How is this going to be the most fun? Let me invite Tanya along the way, right? Um, Never would I have set out to be like, what sounds fun? Let me take a road trip and then have Tanya come along, right? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
us go meet somewhere. Let's go fly and meet somewhere for sure. But like, let me be in a car for 20 hours, not my idea of fun. So when I was at the very beginning of thinking, okay, how do we get the dog? Because airlines don't fly from Texas to Hawaii. So how do we get the dog from Texas to Hawaii? We first have to go to West Coast. One of the thoughts I had was, well, I could drive Murphy and then I could see if Tanya wanted to come. But we ended up having, Jason, my husband, and then my dad, they road tripped to San Diego together. So that is where the first intention of the road trip started. So when you texted me and you're like, well, when your bestie wants to have a road trip, I'm like, I would never do a road trip just because.
And for me, I was thinking, I love road trips. I've had some really great experiences on road trips, um, road trips with friends, road trips with my husband. And I've also had some really amazing growth experiences on road trips. So I was thinking, oh, well, I need to bring, because I just moved from Oregon to California, en route to the eventual boat that we plan to move to. And I thought, all right, I've got to get my car from Oregon down to California, and my husband is going to be up in Canada diving. So Erin mentioned she wanted a road trip. Maybe that's like, maybe I should invite her along because she said she wanted to do a road trip and film it. And I'm going to be going on a road trip. Not also paying attention to what do I really want? Because I don't typically ask myself first, what do I want?
I always
So,
do.
and
But this
I,
is why it's like the best, I don't want to say the best friendship, right? But like such a good like contrast, right? We get to see, like, we bring the other, what would you call it? Like, we're the other side of the coin, or I know you say a lot, like we're the same side of the coin, just a different edge, but like we are the opposite of each other. So we have a lot of similarities, and then we have a lot of opposites, contrasts of each other. And it gives us opportunities when I'm feeling a certain way of not the high vibe, that you're able to shine light from, because you have very similarities of my child, my husband, like all the people I surround myself with. And then I do the same for you when,
exactly,
yeah. So
exactly. So I, in the past, have not typically asked myself what I want first. And part of that is an adaptation of needing to make sure that um, that everyone around me is happy, that everyone around me has like seen me as an asset, seen me as valuable, seen me as lovable. So I am oftentimes not asking myself first what I want. I'm bending to sort of anticipate or think about what somebody else wants.
Because that's how you used to think you got your worth.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
So when you said, I want to do a road trip, I had a couple thoughts come up. So by now you've already moved to Maui.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, if you mention road trip, that she wanted to, I'm thinking you wanted to do a road trip. And I'm thinking, I would be totally fine. Like this was in the back of my mind, but I didn't allow it to come forward. I'd be totally fine to do a 12, 15-hour road trip by myself. Like I would love it. Alone time, blaring my music, speeding in and out of curves, like doing all the things.
Yeah.
I have a fun
That you
car to
love to
drive
do.
that
Yeah.
I love to do. I have a fun car to drive. Um, and a car for me is freedom. Like I equate being able to drive my car, go where I want, drive how I want to freedom.
Because that's how it was growing up for you, right? That was kind of, if you want to
Yes.
call it, your escape, right? You got a car and you got to leave the oppressive nature of what it was to live in your house.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, like I said, road trips for me are like freedom. They're getting out and doing what I want to do in a space that I feel like I have control over. You know, if I'm behind the wheel, if I'm the one driving, I've got control over my environment and I get to make it the way I want it to be and I get to go wherever I want to go. So I had the thought, Erin wants to do a road trip. I would be totally fine to do a road trip with my friend. Let me see if she wants to fulfill that need, desire, wish, whatever it
Her
was.
wish. Her wish, not mine. Her wish. Let me fulfill her wish for her.
Yeah, because you had said
Subconsciously, right? Like subconsciously, that's what you were doing unknowingly, right? But you
absolutely.
were like, let me fulfill that wish for her. That would make her happy. And then in turn, then I would feel happy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if I'm going to invite you all the way from Maui, I better make it worthwhile. I better make it worth it.
That's not
Because,
the first time that that's come up, right? Like that's come up multiple times for you.
yep, yep. It came up for me when you came and visited for Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to, she was just here in October. If I'm going to have her fly back to help me clear out my house, I better make it worth it for her, especially since she's coming over Thanksgiving. So, like, be prepared to do all the things that you know she's going to want to do.
And what did I text you? This isn't exactly like the text isn't after Thanksgiving, but when you're like, well, I thought I should do this and this and this. And then what did I text you? Do you remember? When you told me all of those things, like, well, I should have that. We should be able to stop at all these places down on California coast and we should do this. And I should all of these things.
I
What did
don't
I text you?
remember.
I'm
I
like,
don't.
that's fucking exhausting to be
Oh,
planning it or like, like this, what is the word? Like,
all the ways I was shitting on myself.
yeah. And just like these high expectations to be pleasing me.
But I didn't even realize
Yeah,
this initially, right? I was
of course.
thinking, if you're going to come, I'll have you stay through the 3rd, May 3rd. So you came over on the 26th. Late that night, you got in on the 26th. And I was thinking, I should have her stay until May 3rd because that's likely the day I'm going to fly back up to meet my husband so that we can then do the drive together down. And my guidance was just like, yeah, May 3rd. And there was this sort of feeling in the back that I was like, well, what am I going to do to entertain her that whole time? If she's going to come here, you know you're going to want to do all the things that she wants to do. So then what did I do? I put it back to you and I was like, yeah, where do you want to go? What do you want to see? Where do you want to stop? Like you go ahead and plan it all, because I didn't even want to think about that. And I'm like, oh, well, Erin loves to go on adventures and plan all of these things. So I basically handed it back to you to plan. And how are you feeling about that?
I was unaware that subconsciously, obviously, that you were, because when you said, will you plan it? I'm tired of making all the decisions. I could
I had
100% like, that would be something that I would say sometimes, because from that place of always making the decisions, and you just recently moved, and then you were just like, it was just one thing after another for you. So when you said that, I was like, oh, for sure. And of course I love to like plan and do the things, right? So that's fine. And then this is where awareness goes. So hindsight, like one of the things that I've learned is like, okay, obviously you're more aware than you have been in the past, but moving forward, okay, what are you wanting out of this? What do I want out of this? Are you unconsciously people pleasing because we have that type of relationship where we can have those conversations? Because sometimes I think and I do this too, like we get so excited. It's just like, wait a second, put a pause just for a hot second and be like, okay, what am I actually feeling in my body? Is this like hurried energy, or like, do I need to like, what do I need to do? Or are we falling back into those old patterns unknowingly? Or is this like genuinely like, yeah, like you plan it. I don't want to plan it. That's not something I enjoy. And then, you know, what but I want to be able to do XYZ. This is Tanya talking, and Erin wants to do XYZ. And how can we marry those two together, kind of thing.
Yep.
So
then I ended up booking an Airbnb before we actually left to do the road trip. So the night that you came in, and then the second night, knowing that David was going to be going off to Canada and we weren't going to be leaving just right when you came in. And when I booked the Airbnb, there was this thing that cropped up about doing aerial silks, which I got super excited about because that was something I was wanting to explore. And I asked, hey, do you want to go do this thing? And Erin, who's always down for everything.
I'll try anything once. Yeah, sure. Go, let's go.
Right. That ended up being such a good experience. And it was something I said that I wanted to do. I knew that you were down with it. And like having that experience together, I think was amazing, not only for me, because I was able to receive you saying, this isn't my thing. And like, you go,
I'll take all the time.
Yeah.
Did you feel awkward when I said that at first? Like, were you
I
like,
didn't.
oh,
I
good.
didn't.
Nice.
And so that was realizing, like just now, actually, in recounting this past experience, I'm like, oh, I actually received that really well. Where in the past to be like, oh, you don't like it? We can leave. We can wrap this up. We can stop. Is there something else that you would rather do? And I didn't do any of that. So in that moment, I actually received that experience really well. And I was like, I'm just like a grown-up version that had a lot of oppression of your daughter.
My daughter's the non-oppressive. Yeah.
She hasn't, like, I had the monkey and kind of beaten out of me, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I love hanging upside down and doing all kinds of fun things with my body in that way that wasn't fun for you. So I'm just now realizing that I actually received that really well. And then we hit the road. And we hit the road that afternoon after we properly fed our bodies and eliminated our bodies and hit the road. And noticing that I was also, when we had talked previously about things, I had said, do you want to just sort of do it as we go? Because instead of planning things ahead, we ended up, or I suggested, let's see how we feel and plan things as we go. So we ended up in Eureka that first night, and stayed in a hotel, which was good. Uh, you had slept pretty well that night in the hotel, but what about the Airbnb? Do you want to talk at all about that? What your experience was there?
In the Airbnb, um,
Was there anything significant there for you versus the hotel?
I definitely think, and I told you this before, I definitely think that there's a different component when it's just me and you, or me and you and the girls. Like when we're just all together without our families or spouses, there's a different, for lack of a better word, like feeling. Like I've gotten really comfortable, being around your husband, David. But I think that there's just a different, and I mean, that was a pretty fast turnaround. Like, I don't know if you guys did some stuff during that first day, so we didn't really hang out much. Um, but yeah, the Airbnb, I don't think I had, me and noises. I didn't know, like, I mean, the train, right? But it is what it is. But no, I think what I ended up telling you is that there's just a dynamic that I like when it's us girls by ourselves than there is when there are spouses or families, or I don't know, other people that maybe we don't know. And I'm all for like getting outside my comfort zone, but like here we go back to like, what do I really like? I really like just either one-on-one or us with, when I say the girls, like Christy and Brenda, like all of us together. Sans family, that doesn't mean we can't come, right? But like in the Airbnb, what I've realized is I like those connections the best, I think, is what it is.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's if if I could poke just a little bit. I'm wondering if there's some, like, when other personalities and dynamics come into play, there's too many variables that feel uncomfortable.
Too
Because I
many
know I feel that
variables.
too. I
I
feel
think
that
it's,
too.
I think, and I mean, I told you this before, right? Like David brings up some of the things that with my mom, like, I mean, and we're being candid and we're open, but like him and the light switches, I'm just like, I don't even understand it. It literally is like probably $1 a year you might spend on a light switch, but he likes all the lights off. That is how my mom is. And I love bright light. I
Me
love
too.
windows to be open. I love, like, I'm not saying, I mean, Grayson will be like, well, mom, you always tell me to turn my light off. I'm like, when we're leaving the house, right? But like, if you come into our house right now, all the windows are open. There's tons of light. And I've noticed on every occasion, right? Like he likes all of the lights off. I think it is very reminiscent of me being with my mom. And I've noticed that even at her house, growing up for sure, but even like they have a beautiful backyard. It's like open the windows. The windows are always shut and things of that sort. So I think that there's some of those things that here we go back to like, sometimes my body recognizes it before my mind does. It's like, ooh, I don't like this. I don't like turning off the light when I'm sitting in the living room and I have the kitchen right there, like, why can't we have
Yeah.
the light on, which seems so little, but really what it is like those memories from childhood that come back up to like, how do we both, and this is one of the things I've had to learn, is like, how can we both have what we want? I mean, I guess if you're being semantics or talking about like a light switch, I mean, it's either on or it's off, but like in the grand scheme of things, how do we get to all have kind of what we want versus I've come from like, if you get what you want, then I don't get what I like. One of us has to lose in order to get what we want.
David
One of us.
David has said that before too. And I think
Yeah.
this actually plays into the entire experience that we had. Um, the sort of the binary, the ones and zeros, right? The all dark, all light. Somewhere in the middle, there's a harmony. Like our darkness holds light. The experience of the light switches is very metaphorical for the whole experience that we are going through, and even some discussions that we've had just in the last day or so about, like, I was realizing I'm always craving the sun and craving the outdoors, but then getting outside and having those experiences for me, I oftentimes have felt safer. Like, think about on a road trip, safer in a car rather than out on, I mean, I loved my bike for the freedom that it gave me before I could get a car, but once I got my car, I was like, I'm on my car. um, the safety that we feel sometimes within a contained space versus out in the open, and vice versa, right? You and I have both had that experience, not only with each other, but with our spouses. Um, and so, like, I was just noticing, my guidance was kind of like, there's something about the Airbnb to poke about. So that illuminates this, um, like how we look at relationships, and like this whole experience that we're talking about, the road trip, um, is depictive of everything, like how we
Yeah, how we do
use.
one thing is like how we do everything, right? Like when I think what I've noticed too is like I love movement. Like
Mhm,
I love movement. That
me
might
too.
be walking around, that might be, like I think for Tanya, what we're realizing is for Tanya, it might be like her dancing in the morning is equivalent to me working out. Like if I don't do that, if I miss a day, it's fine. I let my body rest. But 2 or 3 days, I'm like feeling that urge to do that, and not like I have to have it, right? But it just feels good to move my body. So when we sit a lot, and obviously it's a road trip, right? But getting out and walking around and like taking time and doing those things, realizing that movement is something that's very important to me throughout eh, all of my life, right? Like here, or when I go on vacation, and so noticing and having those conversations like, okay, what are you kind of envisioning? Which I think you're kind of a movement person too, but some
Mhm.
people aren't, right?
Some
Some people are,
people, I think, are afraid, like, and they don't, oftentimes they aren't aware, they don't realize what fears might be harboring underneath the surface. Like, it's an unconscious thing of why it is. um, if you look at movement from a nature standpoint, all of nature moves at one degree or another. Some things move fast, some things move slow, but all of nature is evolving and moving, and we are part of nature. So when we're afraid to move, sometimes that could be afraid to move forward in our lives. Sometimes that could be afraid to go outside. It could be afraid to be in a moving car. I mean, there's lots of different ways that these fears can show up. And usually there's some underlying story or.
want to put the Ethernet. I'm like, I am on the wrong computer, or hang on. I know I'm interrupting you, but so we
Okay.
have actual Ethernet. Sorry about that. Yeah, there's like some underlying story, or something
Pattern,
that's patterned.
conditioning, exactly, that's showing
Yeah.
up. So in the travel to get here, there was one point that we got off 101 and got onto the one. This feels like a Saturday Night Live episode of the Californians. So we left the I-5 and we got on the 101, and then from the 101 we got on the one, and then from the one we came up back out to the 101. I can do that. I'm from California. Um, but when we were on the one going through the redwood forest, I was like, I want to zoom, zoom, zoom. And that
Mm-hmm.
was uncomfortable for you.
Yeah. And it's not, okay. So one of the things is I'm looking at my thing. Sorry. I might need to so I unplugged it out of my Dell. I plugged it into my Mac. So we'll see. Okay. So here's also something else too of like, this is you being able to say, I want to go fast, right? Or I want to like have the top down. Like after there have been times, or like after you dropped me off, you had the convertible. I don't know what you call it. It's not sunroof, but like the convertible. I'm like, we never did that. Why didn't we do that? And just realizing how much you don't say something from a subconscious place of fear that someone might say, me specifically, right? On this trip, I might say no, and that feels like rejection, right? It's like we really go back to, and that doesn't feel safe, right? And so
Because
on
when we had gotten here, there's still some stuff in between, but when we had gotten here and we were talking about potentially our first day of exploring together, I said, do you want to go to Point Lobos? And I was thinking about putting the top down, putting the tunes on, going and doing a hike together, the movement. I'm thinking all the things that Aaron would like. And you were like, I don't want to go to Point Lobos. I'm cold. And yeah, so there,
But that
like,
was at the point, was that already when I was like, I had already made the decision to leave?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I think if it was,
But what I'm
um,
saying is
oh,
rejection for
oh
sure.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Um, so driving, driving fast around windy roads gets my stomach super hopping. I don't know how else, right? Like, but if I go slower, it doesn't seem to affect me as much. And Tanya over here in her zip, 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 do. Oh, and something that came up for me that I wasn't aware of is like safety is important to me. Like I always kind of like make comments about Jason because that's kind of his thing, but safety is, it's like if she loses control of this car, there's like big redwoods right here to um, kiss, connect with.
This might go into um, your feeling of like I'm not in control in this
100%.
enclosed space.
Yeah. Right. So
And
you're
so,
driving, I'm not driving, which I have gotten better at. Jason drives a lot now. I kind of started in Costa Rica because I don't know how to parallel park. I do. I just don't do it very easily or like what do you not flawlessly, I guess is the word. So there were lots of places that it was just easier for us to back in or parallel park. And so I was just like, well, you can just start driving. Anyway, so he drives here a lot now, which for years I drove all the time because one, it helps with like the car sickness for me at least. And it also is right. Like it's that control piece, right? Like if I'm in control, if I'm doing it, then I know. Um,
because
and
you
so
can't
noticing that,
trust
mm-hmm,
trusting
that's been,
others to be in control. Like this is my story is I do like to be in control of things, but I'm also like giving that away to other people. Whereas you are like, nope, let me take the control. Like, let me pull it all back to me.
so that was, um, and I think I'm pretty good at like, I've noticed letting go of that and also still speaking what I want. Like, hey, you wanted to drive fast, totally fine. And then like, okay, I really do need you to slow down. Like, I don't feel like I'm gonna vomit, like pull over, kind of thing. And like
Mhm.
letting that be okay to say. I feel like I've always been one to speak my mind, as I've been told, or maybe too harsh or whatever.
Mhm.
So letting go of some of those reins has been my work, right? Like, okay, she's she feels confident. She feels like my work has been like, okay, trusting, like, okay, she's feels confident. She knows how to drive her car. She's, you know, um, all of those. And, and then allowing a little bit of that uncomfortableness. And then also when it gets to the point of like, okay, no, really, like you don't have to I don't say compromise anymore, but like, let's just use that word. Like, okay, no, you really do need to just stop. Like you need to pull over asking for what we want. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so having that, here we go back to like that harmony or that middle ground of like, yeah, she got to drive, she wanted to drive fast, she got to do those things. And then letting go of the reins for Aaron. And then also saying, okay, I just want to like, I need a moment to whatever you want to call it, get
Yeah.
back to.
Each of us in practice, which is also akin to play, right? This practice of, I was driving slow and then we had a discussion. I said, I really kind of want to, I've got a stack up of cars behind me. I want to do a little zoom. And you saying, I'm okay with that. I'm gonna practice focusing on my breath and just being able to allow you to do that. And I'm going to focus on managing what I need to in the moment. Me doing some zoom, and then you saying, okay, like when I've had enough of this practice, and can you pull over
Yeah.
for a little
And I
bit?
think this goes back to like both sides of those coins, right? Like of me practicing and saying, because before it probably would have been like, no, just a shutdown for me, right? Like, no, I don't want to do that. Right. And me overpowering, if that's, and
Mm-hmm.
then the practice has been, well, I just won't ask because what's the point? Or I don't want to upset anybody. So you getting to say like, hey, I really want to do this. And me saying, that's fine. Okay, I'll work on this, and like you just said, like having that expansion or, practice for both of us. And then, coming back to.
Yeah. So then, carrying on throughout the trip, our um, our second day, uh, and then getting here later in the evening. Um, where it was planned initially when we set up the trip. um, our friends that are hosting us in our interim space said they were going to be out of town. I thought we were going to have the house to ourselves, and then when that didn't turn up, here we have the dynamic of, they are here as well as their kids and all of the dogs, and so we have a house full. And um, because I'm sleeping with the cat as well right now, it was like, okay, well, let's set up a separate space for Aaron,
Yeah.
which they graciously did. And there was a certain degree of discomfort that came up for you.
I think also too, probably old Aaron would have slept with you and the cat and been really angry about it. So I knew you weren't going to be upset when I started thinking about it, I'm like, I don't want to sleep with a cat. Like I love your cat. I don't love many cats, but I love your cat. But I don't want to sleep. Like I don't have dogs that sleep on our bed. I don't
I
have
don't want to sleep
cats.
with him either, but the space that we have right now, he oftentimes is like, nope, I want humans. And so if he's not in his bed, he's up in mine. Yeah.
But
So,
you get what I'm saying, right? Like, so
yep.
I think that here we go back to like different people live differently,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. And also speaking up for like I was taught, don't be too harsh. So when you say what you want, that's really rude. So I wouldn't say things and then I would be angry about it. You wouldn't say things because you were concerned someone wasn't going to love you or,
Mm-hmm.
so it was like, we've all
And I
been
would be
people.
angry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then just noticing, and I think, for me, I think part of my story has always been like, I'm fine. I'll just deal with it, or I'm going to be okay. I'm strong. I can take it kind of thing. I've had to build like a very strong exterior wall in my life, if for lack of a better word. And I think that there have been things that have come up for me, not just there, but in general, that I had repressed, suppressed for a long time that I didn't think were as big of a deal because let's be honest, if there's not many people that are going to comfort you, it's like, well, you just kind of one of my coping mechanisms is like it's not that big of a deal, right? Like am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like talking about, the two dogs, like when I thought about it, it's like, wow, I've had like two dogs. One has, died drowning. One has been attacked, that had surgery and all those things. But in my mind, or if you were to ask me, like, it probably didn't even register. Like that's a big deal for someone. But I never thought it was because it's just like, that's just, hey, that's just the way life is. That's kind of have been my, hey, suck it up, things happen, move on down the road.
I also think it has to do a little bit with we've had the conversation about like you have been able to witness and see within your husband. He feels safe in the house, but not as much out in the world. I feel really safe out in the world, but less so in my house. Um, we've had the discussions. Anyone who's seen anything with Who University and Aaron and I might know that I had what might be considered a difficult childhood. And by all accounts or perceptions, Aaron, you had a good childhood or an easy childhood, two parents, family business, etc., kind of thing. Um, but this contrast of where we feel safe, what we feel we can make a big deal about or not make a big deal about, like I should or shouldn't feel this way
Right.
based on like, oh, I had a rough childhood. Of course, maybe I should feel this way. And you shouldn't, or vice versa, right?
Right.
Um, and so the experience that you had when we first got here and the dog scared you, I remembered the conversation that we'd had some time ago about your your one dog that drowned
Mhm.
versus and it had just recently come up about Missy being attacked. And
Mhm.
so of course when we were going down a dark hallway
Yep.
and the dog came out barking,
Yeah.
that was a trigger. That
Yeah.
was
For
a
sure.
big trigger. And you had forgotten until I said something, well, of course, like of
Yes.
no wonder you felt that way
Yeah.
having had this experience.
Yeah. And also with Dozer, right? It was almost like, hey, wait, like, and also, you're tired. Aaron's tired at 11 o'clock when we've been driving all day, but like that now is not the time to be doing that. Like it's not the time to be meeting the animals and making sure that they connect and all of these things. And Dozer was visibly scared and feeling like in my body, it was obviously fear and it was agitation. Like, why are we doing this right now? It's bedtime, like separate the animals, let's go to bed. Um, and not, it's like the body remembers before the mind does, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so having that experience with Dozer and like feeling like, Tanya, are you gonna do something? Like, are you gonna like Dozer's over here hissing? Like, what are you doing? Like, is this gate, these dogs can jump over? Like, are you protecting your animal kind of thing? And so realizing that, like I said, I mean, you don't even know until it happens. And then you're like, oh, my kid asks me all the time, like, tell me about this part of your childhood. I'm like, I don't remember. But then something happens and then it triggers that memory.
Yeah. And I was having a completely opposite experience because I knew that Finn, their one dog, has a loud bark and he's like not aggressive. He's not other than so he's a rescue and he's got his own trauma. He's very anxious. Um, he's easily excitable. So I knew that even though Finn was coming down the hallway barking, that everything was fine. Like we weren't in danger, but you didn't know that. So in that particular instance, I felt safe and comfortable. And then with
Wait, let me
Odie,
stop you real quick. This
yeah.
is interesting because I think also like the experiences that we've had, right? Like, so we always have all of this evidence to
Hmm.
prove our beliefs true, right? Like, so
Hmm.
I see my brain currently want to argue like you don't actually know the way animals are, right? Like, or animals actually, like, you can't control them, or I don't want to say you can't control them, but like if something gets triggered in them, right, they could do this. And so I have lots of evidence for where animals have not been trained, have not been whatever you want to call it, right? And you don't have any evidence of that. And so your belief is a different belief than what mine is. And just noticing like people, when we're like, there's no actual right or wrong, right? It's just, where do our beliefs come from? I just have lots and lots of evidence of, and not just with my dogs, like other dogs that I've seen, things of that sort. And so you have your laundry list of all of your evidence to support, hey, that's not the case.
Here's where I'm safe, here's where I'm not safe. And then the body takes over that belief before the mind, because we can't, the mind is very slow, actually. The mind um, needs to think about something, whereas the body is like, no, I got to be able to react immediately.
Immediately. Yeah,
If it,
you touch the stove, you pull back before your brain is like, it is hot, da, 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 da. It is a reactionary.
exactly.
Yeah.
So these are the programs that we carry in our body, and that's why the body oftentimes knows before the mind does. And sometimes the body knows when the mind's like, what's going on? I don't know. I don't remember. Like you not remembering the trauma of Missy being attacked, even though you weren't there because you heard the story about it, there's this like lack of safety there. And so what I was noticing with Finn, I'm like, it's safe. Finn's just loud, and that can be scary, but I know that it's okay. Um, and then when Odie came around the corner, um, Odie
I
is,
didn't feel anything. What's really interesting is like Odie reminded me of Murphy. Like I didn't feel anything with him. I felt like he was like wanted to see Dozer and it was exciting, but he had been outside and chasing the other cat. But I think by that time it was 11 or 12. I'm like, "Ugh, I don't want to do this right now. Like I just want to go to bed kind of thing. And
yeah.
noticing.
And so when Dozer, you had come in to say hi to Dozer, and when he was hissing, you were thinking, I don't know what he's going to do. Like, is he going to lash out at me because I'm the closest thing because he's afraid? But I'm like, Dozer's fine and Odie's fine. Odie's just like, I'll smell a cat. I'm super excited about that. Like, it smells different. And Dozer's just like, I don't like you. But I'm like, I didn't feel any sort of lack of safety or discomfort. And
I'm like, get me out of this place.
yeah, yeah. So it's like, where do we find our safety? Where are we feeling okay? And this is where, again, you and I have different stories, because there's plenty of times where I have stories about not safe, not safe, not safe, right? Um, which in the past, not safe, not safe, not safe would have been your friend coming in and saying, I want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
That's rejection. That's like, that is a fundamental problem with me, that you are leaving. How do I fix that? How do I fix the fact that I'm more trouble than I'm worth, or I'm not lovable, or I'm not valuable, that she would want to leave? Right there in the past, I've got lots of evidence where that is not a safe space for me to be. My dad rejecting me,
Mm-hmm.
past relationships where I've been rejected,
Mm-hmm.
trying to commit suicide and having told someone and then having them say, thanks, bye, and taking something that I gave them, right? So exactly what you were saying about, we have all of this evidence, which is what we give our focus to and what is sort of patterned and programmed in the body. And then we react or we respond. If we're responding, we're having a moment to bring our lid back down, to feel safe, to feel grounded, to feel oriented in our experience that we're having, and then to be able to move forward from there. Or we're reacting, not safe, lids off. We've moved out of our prefrontal cortex, our rational mind. We're back either into our limbic, our emotion. Emotions are high, intelligence is low. Or we are really back into the amygdala where we're like, not safe,
Get me out
not
of this
safe.
place. Yeah. What are we going to do? Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think I also want to say, because I think sometimes people, at least I did for myself, misconstrue that when our lid comes back online and we are able to like, okay, look, it was safe. It's totally fine. We can also have our evidence or our belief, and we can still decide that the answer would still be the same, right? Like, or our desire would still be the same. I think sometimes, like I said, I mean, I misconstrued it. It's like, oh, well, I could think differently about this and I could change that. But what we always need to come back to is, where is it coming from? Do we want to, right? Like, do we want to actually, like, do I know it's safe when a dog's, on your bed or right up in your face? 100%. Do I want a dog up on my bed and in my face? I do not. Do I want anybody else's dog up on my face? No, I do not. So even though I know it's safe,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm in other people's houses, I have lots of friends that keep all of their dogs on the bed, I don't want that. And that's okay. But I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we can, we think about changing the way we think about things, and we use that against us. Well, it should be okay. It doesn't have to be okay. Like, it always comes back to like, what do we actually want? There are some things that I'm like, you know what? I do want to think differently and change that and feel, differently about that. And others, I'm like, no, I really like that part, and I don't want to change it.
That is the beauty of the awareness piece, because there's, as I'm seeing it, there are three scenarios that could happen. That experience could happen and our lids come back, but we are not in the awareness that we have a choice. And so we're just like, avoid this situation at all costs. That means that we don't go have experiences, or that we don't bring ourselves outside of our comfort zones because of what we might find, which then just keeps making our world smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yep.
Versus the opportunity of, okay, I have awareness that this is what was, we talk about like postmortem, after something's happened, sitting and talking and feeling it out. Okay, what happened? I felt like I lost safety here. I can see where it's triggered. And I love what you always say about like this practice that you're coming to. I could, but do I want to? Like, I could do that. I could change how I react or respond to that. But do I want to?
I think that's really important, because that is, at least coming from my perspective, I think we probably all have, right? Like, we've all done things we don't want to do. We've all managed, it's fine, all of those things, right? And this is what you and I were talking about in the car. It's compromising from a place of wanting to versus compromising because we feel like we have to, right? Like, do I want to compromise and let Tanya drive fast? Yeah, I do. Do I want to compromise and have dogs on my bed? No, I don't. And so, and I just use those because those are the examples we've been using, right? But like, those are the things that, like, where is that compromising coming from? Is it coming from the place of, I want you to love me, I don't want you to be mad at me, protection and self-preservation and safety at all costs? Or is it coming from, you know what? I don't necessarily like shopping all the time, but I'll go with my kid because it's one of the things that she really likes to do. And I can walk around and I can watch her, and that's okay. And so, and And it also doesn't have to be one way or the other, right? Like there are times where I'm like, yeah, I'll go with you. And there are times where like, I don't want to go. I've been there a couple of times this month. Don't want to go back. And so where are we choosing? It's always a choice and wanting, like really getting clear. But I think that also takes like some stillness, some like almost like slowing down, like freezing time a little bit to be like, okay, wait a second, give me a second. I think also because if you're one of these people who are expected to make a decision quickly, which I think I've kind of, I don't know how I developed that, but I was. What I've noticed about myself is I kind of need to, it might be a hell yes in my body, but I need to just ride it for a bit because sometimes my emotion is so excited about this that I'm not kind of like thinking it through and like, what are some of the things that I might want to not do or maybe put some boundaries around and then coming back and having those conversations around.
Yeah. And for me, my growth, like when we sat in here that next morning and we had the conversation and you were like, okay, I'm thinking about either maybe going home early or I would want to get an Airbnb so that I could have my space. Um, and I was like, what do I want to do? So for me, the goal is asking what I want. My growth edge is stopping to ask myself, what do I want? And prioritizing that. For you, what would you say your growth edge is?
My growth edge is saying,
Because you know
it's the
what you
same,
want most of the time.
it's still saying, it's saying what I know what I want. It's doing what I want. And I know that might be I think it's similar, but like you've already said this, but I can do anything. Do I want to do it? That's where my growth edge is like, I've done all of the things, you can sleep on a floor, you can, whatever it is, right? Do I want to do that anymore? And sometimes I do, right? Like for whatever it might be. And sometimes here we go back to like, I don't want to say compromise here, but like sometimes we might want to, right? Like doing a road trip, New Zealand, not my most favorite, but like, yeah, that's what I want to do in order to see New Zealand. That's probably one of the things I'm going to have to do, right? Or the way I want to see it. Do I want to do a road trip around the US? Probably not. Or, I'm just using that as an example. So I think for me, my growth edge is saying what I want. I don't want to say settling, but that is probably for lack of a better word, what is it that I actually, is that the word I want to use? I don't want to say settle, but like it's fine has been I'll make do. I'll do it, where you just do it and you're not, like I already said, you're resentful about it versus, no, I don't want to do that. I don't.
So just notice how I've adapted. One of the adaptations that I had was to not even ask myself what I want and instead just consider what I think everyone else wants, because I needed to make sure their needs were met first, what I thought they were. And right, half the time I'm guessing because I don't really know.
Yeah, you're not even asking.
Guessing.
Yeah, yeah.
And for you, it's, I know what I want because I've already asked myself, because
Honoring it
then, because how is that going to make others feel?
Yep.
So after you left, noticing like what you decided about surfing, right? And for me, and I'll let you tell that story, but for me, it was my husband coming home and me saying, what do I want? And then being able to verbalize that. And it started actually with you here. It was recognizing, so my lid is on that next morning while we're sitting there talking, and I'm recognizing what I want, which then kind of rolled all the way back. And I said, if I'm being really honest, and I'm thinking about, like, from the very beginning, I wanted to do that road trip alone. I had had zero alone time, and I need my alone time. I had had zero of that. I had had no dancing time. I had had no space for sort of my movement, my freedom. Um, I would have said, I want to do this road trip by myself. And then when I get back to the house, I want to nest. I want to get myself comfortable in the space where I'm at right now without anyone else around me to say, well, I want it this way, or I think you should do it that way. Like, without any of that influence. So for me, then, my growth, what was important to me to practice was being able to say that morning, I'm comfortable here. And it's not right or wrong how you're feeling. It's not right or wrong how I'm feeling, but I'm comfortable here. And for me, what I want is I want to be here. I want to be doing the things I want to do here. I'm happy to go hike Point Lobos today if you want to do that. Um, but I don't want to go do an Airbnb because right now I just feel like I want to get settled here.
Mhm.
And having that experience and knowing that you decide that that was basically going to trigger off for you, or not trigger, but that the choice that you would then make is, I'm going to go home.
Yep.
And that didn't say anything about my lovability or my value, that you would want to leave early, or that I had done it wrong, or that, like, the old stories that would have wanted to come up was, you freaking asked her here. She spent all that money on an airline ticket for 2 days or 3 days. Come on. You need to make it worth it for her. Like, this is that old story of, you're more trouble than you're worth.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me to be able to practice and say, like, that's okay that you want to go home. I'm not taking that as I failed. I'm being
You don't take it
rejected.
on as, yeah. And what we're not saying, but I think is important to say, is like such a beautiful relationship of like where we both get to own our own feelings, and then we both get to come together and be like, okay, this is what I want. This is what I want. Is it a match? And if it's not a match, I love you. And how do we, we both get what we want. And if it is a match, perfect. And the back scenes of that is like probably years worth of work on ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at least for me, it's been the last year being off of really, like honing in and really going inward. But I think that's such a beautiful, like, what a beautiful, because I think my mom was like, you never leave early, and then someone else is asked, like, what, is everything okay? It's like, everything is wonderful. Like, how freeing in our relationship is it? Like, you want to talk about freedom.
Yeah.
This
Ooh,
is
my whole
freedom.
body is just like,
Me too. Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Freedom in a relationship to show up and be exactly who you are. And yes, it helps that the other person loves you unconditionally, but the reason why we can is because of the unconditional love, and for ourselves, like, no matter what, if Tanya was upset, I knew you weren't going to be, but if she was, it would be okay, because this is what's best for Aaron. And doing the work, and working through all of those old stories that I've had to work through in order to show up and be Aaron now in this friendship relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about, just my whole body when you were talking about the
Oh yeah.
freedom, like,
Yeah.
just to be who we are and be okay with that. I know, you got to say goodbye to Jen, and I don't know if you got to say goodbye to Greg briefly, but then they were like, what happened? And I
Mhm.
was like, it was amazing. Like we got everything that we needed. It was so good. And like, this is the experience I was having. This is the experience that she was having. And this is the practice of us both being okay with saying, this is what we need. This is what we want. This is the choice that we're making. In the past, I would have projected my rejection onto Greg and Jen, like with you thinking, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? What are they going to think about me? You know? And I was like, nope, it's great. And they were like, oh, okay, oh, as long as you're happy. Like, I'm like, it was the most amazing trip. It was so good. Like, we got to practice owning what we want. We got to practice. I got to practice going, what do I want? Like, because I sat there. Um, I always have felt this pressure, make a decision, make a decision, make a decision,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And sometimes I'm like, but I need a minute.
Mhm.
It's not been okay for me to take a minute and think about what I want. And usually it's like, I got to put everybody else first.
Laced with. Mhm.
Yeah. So just the luxury, the expansive space to sit here with you that morning and go, what do I want? I don't know.
Which really also too comes back to, and this is one of the things that we talk about, at Who You, is like the vulnerability. And through vulnerability, we get really deep intimacy, right?
Yep.
Which is like it's not a love language, but I'm naming it a love language. Like intimacy, like I want to you know, it's one thing to be like, oh, I want to know all about you and I want to know, but like, no, like all of everything gets aired out, and like my love for myself, your love for me, vice versa. Like that to me is like true friendship, intimacy, all the things.
Yeah. And I love, how I love to play with words and think about what they truly mean. And when you take intimacy and you break it down, it's in to me, I see.
Mhm.
And the more I see into myself and become more of my authentic self without compromising from a place of thinking I don't have a choice,
Or for love.
right? Compromising to get something I think that I need outside of me, that intimacy first starts with ourselves.
Mm.
Into me, I see, which is what the space, the contemplation, um, these experiences allow us to start playing with, because the more into me I see, and I'm able to be my authentic self, and I feel safe and free and um, and comfortable being that then in turn is a gift to others. And you and I can see that now.
Mhm.
Whereas in the past, we might have, there might have been a story about, oh, she's rejecting me, or um, I'm not, like, I'm too much for her, or I'm not good enough for her, or, all the stories that come up that we start telling, and we're telling them about the relationships in our lives. And then that becomes the thing that starts shrinking our world instead of opening our world up and expanding it.
Kind of like what I said about like we have all this evidence, right? So we have all this evidence in our past that we bring into our future versus this was such a beautiful experience in my past because it taught me what I want now or I don't want. And I get to use that and change that story moving forward. Not easy, but worth it, right? Like
Yes.
totally worth it.
Like when we came out of the one and we hit the 101,
Mm-hmm.
you were like, whew, that was not easy.
like on
but
a highway.
so worth it. It's
Yeah,
so
but so
worth
worth
it.
it. So worth it, right? We came out and we had all these, I mean, the going from Leggett all the way over to the California coast, it's just like all these trees, beautiful trees, right? But you know me, I'm an ocean girl. And so then you open up into the vast Pacific and, the color of the water, like it's just indescribable. And I think that's just like a perfect analogy. Metaphor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Metaphor for growth, right? Like not easy, but totally worth it.
Sometimes you feel a little nauseous or queasy,
Oozy.
or you're pooping your brains out, or, all the things.
holding on to the ocean bars or whatever we're doing, right? Like perfect metaphor. That is, right? But
Yeah.
totally worth it. And so glad that did it,
Yeah.
doing it,
Yeah. So what have I alluded to the thing about surfing, but what are the things that you noticed? You made the decision, I'm going to stay in a hotel tonight. I'm going to fly out the next morning and go back home early.
Mhm.
What did you notice that you brought home with you? Like, um, how has this experience now started to permeate the new version of Erin?
Yeah. It was funny. I texted Jason. I was like, as I got Grayson, what did I get her? Oh, I bought her that cotton candy, right, at Whole Foods. And I was like, I thought about getting you something. I'm like, but what you always get when I come home is like this evolved version of Erin. Like that's the best gift, I think, and coming home. And sometimes it's not exactly fun for my spouse because it's like expanded and he's like, wait, what? Hold on. But one of the things, is like, I want to surf. And I had this vision of being over here and where we live and my beginner surfing abilities. Some of the beaches over here are not
Beginner
conducive.
beaches.
Beginner beaches. So I need to travel for some of that. Travel isn't on the island. And, he may or may not be able to come. And one of the things for him is safety, like literal safety, like drowning, seat belts, all those things. And one of the things that I've always done is I know that makes someone feel uncomfortable, so I won't do XYZ. And so just realizing like, no, I'm going. And if my kid doesn't want to surf and you don't want to leave her at home because there's a safety issue there too, then I'm going to go by myself and you have to feel whatever you feel. And so, stepping into that more of like, this is what I want, and you get to feel how you want to feel. And, one of the things I think is we think we're being helpful. I didn't say this before, but we think we're being helpful by like not doing the thing, but what we're not just keeping ourselves small. It's like everyone around us stays like that too. Right. And so I think the gift that and we don't need to change our spouses or anybody, but like the gift that we get to have as a byproduct is as we expand, most often people around us do too. Because you can't, but not, I mean, I guess you could stay behind, but human nature isn't work like that really. And so, the more that I expand and evolve, the more everyone else around me does as a byproduct unknowingly.
Yeah.
I don't want to say unwilling participants, but for sure they're like,
Well, that's the thing is they get the choice whether they're going to be a participant or not.
Yeah.
Like if you're not growing, you're dying.
You're dying. Yeah.
Right. And that sometimes is a perfectly acceptable choice, right? To choose not to evolve or to want to go a different direction. And sometimes we're consciously making that choice and sometimes we're unconsciously making that choice. But for us, it's that commitment to that intention, that overall intention, that what we're choosing to do is to move towards that natural expansion, to continue to ask for more and be okay with that, to continue to grow, knowing that at some point in time, the cycle to die will come. But I want to be living fully rather than like, sometimes not a choice is the choice, right? My choice is to consciously, whenever possible, be bringing my awareness to how am I living fully? How am I expanding and growing? Because I'm not ready to not. And now I consciously get that choice instead of sort of making it by default.
It's like what you said, like, okay, if you had like what do you want to be, I don't want to say remembered by, but like that I squeeze every little
Very
last
less.
drop, right?
Yep.
It's the same, right? And
Yep.
so it doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that it's comfortable. It doesn't mean that all of those things, right? Like we still feel all of those feelings, but also the other feelings, the joy, the elation, the adventure, the love, all of that gets bigger too. And so,
Yep. And it's just allowing our capacity to, we're gonna experience more of the discomfort so that we can experience the coming into comfort. We're gonna, just like you said, we have to be able to experience greater sadness or um, frustration in order to be able to experience greater happiness and joy and flow in our life, right? There always has to be this harmony. And as we're growing ourselves, we're, sometimes those experiences grow as well. And that's part of what gives us the fuel to make those changes. Yeah. And I'd rather be doing it consciously than not.
Yeah.
So that means I just keep having to ask myself, what do I want? And being able to express that.
Yeah.
And give
And
myself the
also
space
noticing
for it.
that give you, and also noticing that we fall back into patterns. We fall back into like unconscious sometimes. That's
Mhm.
okay. Right. And sometimes we have something that pops us back out of it, right? An event, something that happens that makes us become aware.
Mhm.
That's okay too.
Yep.
I love you so much, my friend.
I
It's
love
always
you
so
too.
fun.
It's all the abundance that we're surrounded by,
It's
right?
good. Yeah,
Experience, friendships, the growth. So good.
it is so good.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say?
Now I get to just give myself some more space and see what it is that I want. I have been changing a couple things lately. You are surfing. I am like, well, until I get my space set up to dance and do silks and stuff like that, I've been out on the driveway, dancing up and down the driveway and walking up and down that steep hill and not giving a shit. Like the FedEx driver came up today and I was like dancing my way up the hill in reverse and he just smiled at me and I was like, Shaka. And he was like, yeah, like, I probably look kind of funny, but I don't care.
But that
Yeah.
comes back to like the love for ourselves, right? Like it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
Yeah. He can reject me.
You
I
and
don't
me.
care.
Yeah.
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 How about you?
Okay.
You feel complete?
I feel good. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Until next time.
Until next time. I love you.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.